For USCFootball.com, I'm Jack Smith, joined by Connor Morrissette for instant analysis from USC's Wednesday practice of Maryland week. We had Chris yesterday for Chris Trevino week. He flew out, so it was Connor and I and Ahmad at practice today, but we want to give you our instant analysis. And Connor, why don't you start with your practice observations?
Sure. We go in and we get to see the kick and punt returners doing some work. And correct me if I'm wrong, Jack, I didn't see a single muff today, and we have seen some in the past. So that's a good omen. Guys were hanging onto the ball. And DJ Jordan made a really nice catch on a shank punt that was curling out of bounds. He looked like a wide receiver that he is, and he made a nice grab, got 2 feet in. It would have been good in the NFL. No, it was a punt, so a little bit different than a pass, but he made a really nice play. And a few other receivers, you might talk about this in a little bit, Jack, made some nice plays as well. The big news, Lake McCree participated in some scout team work, and he was getting hit. It looks like, if I had to guess, nothing for sure, we haven't heard from Lincoln Riley, but if I had to guess, I think Lake is going to be good to go against Maryland, so that'll be a big help for a passing game that's sort of stalled a little bit these past couple weeks.
Yeah, the receiver that you mentioned that I was going to talk about, Zachariah Branch, was getting a lot of extra work in that stretch team period. He was already stretched out, so while everybody else was stretching, he was making catches on the sideline, whether it was 2 hands, 1 hands from different angles, and he made one of the crazier catches we've seen on the practice field, twisting his body, a one-handed catch, not like Odell Beckham where he's falling back. It was almost like he had to reach out and grab it the opposite way with one hand on the sideline. It was a great catch. And then we saw him after practice, too, running extra route patterns with Miller Moss and Jaden Mayava and made a tremendous one-handed catch that was diving forward on what looked like a 50-yard post pattern. So I think people have questioned his hands, and yes, maybe he has made some bad drops in ill-timed situations, and could he have fewer drops going forward? That would be huge for USC, but you can see the potential there with the hands, and I think it's all about focus and mentality, and we've seen him over the last couple of days when he's getting that extra work in seem to be like that confident self and celebrating a lot, and so I think that could be a good potential sign. Now, it's practice, it's all about what it's like in the games, but very curious to see how he responds to what is ultimately a disappointing first 6 games of the season.
He's been working really hard. You can't question the work ethic. I believe Zion Branch, his brother, just said he wants to win really badly, and he's still working hard. So, again, you can't fault the work ethic. Just got to hope that he figures a few things out here. It's good to see him getting that extra work after practice. And as a receiver, it's all about getting open. I'd like to see him get open a little bit more down the field, and the pass protection needs to hold up. You feel bad for a guy like that who came in so highly ranked, had such high expectations this season, hasn't really gone according to plan. But, hey, half the season is left to go, and he can flip the script if he makes some of these crazy one-handed catches that we're seeing in practice in the game. Maybe not even one-handed in the game. Just bring it down with 2 hands, Zachariah, and the USC fans, they'll be right back in your corner in no time.
Yeah, I have a feeling that one play could be what unlocks him the rest of the way. It's like a shooter that just needs to see one fall down at the beginning of a game. I think you could say the same thing about USC right now, a team that has 3 losses by a combined 13 points. Energy was high at practice today despite the fact that it was a gloomy day, fall weather kind of hitting for the first time, and I guess it maybe comes right after USC loses for a 3rd time. But not a lot of people around on campus, so you would have maybe assumed that USC would be walking through the motions, but we saw them get pretty high energy at points during practice and after practice. What were some of your observations from what we saw as well as the people that we talked to on a day that maybe could have been a little bit lower energy?
After practice today, D'Anton Lynn, he talked about the importance of trusting the young players when he gives them a chance to play in these games. So we saw Desmond Stevens have that great interception and play a really solid game against Penn State. I thought he was in on a lot of key moments as well outside of that pick. And Lynn, he was asked, what has Stevens done to separate himself, and what can some of these other younger players do to be in that position too? And Lynn talked about it starts with trust. I got to be able to trust these guys that when I make a call, they know what they're doing. Everyone has ability. It's USC. We're not recruiting guys if they don't have the ability to play, but we need to trust them. And he sort of, Jack, I took it as poured a little cold water on Cameron Fountain playing a lot against Maryland. I think he'll get into the game, but he's so raw, and Lynn emphasized that. And he said guys like Cam Fountain, he's made some big strides, but we'll see what the game plan calls for. And I do think he'll get in a little bit, but I don't expect him to play double-digit snaps in this one unless there's an injury. That was one of my bigger takeaways, too. Lynn sort of, it seemed to me said, calm down a little bit on some of the Fountain hype, which, hey, makes a lot of sense. The guy is a really raw prospect, but I think going forward, it might not be this year that he has a huge impact. He'll be thrown into the fire a little bit, it looks like, but I think next year we could see him play a little bit more. So that's a projection on my end, but that's sort of what it sounded like to me a little bit, so we'll see.
Yeah, I felt the same thing. And then I felt like he kind of walked it back a little when he was asked, where is he raw? And he's like, oh, well, all of the freshmen are. Everybody's raw. You mentioned Desmond Stevens getting his opportunity. I got to talk with him after practice about that. He said it wasn't like this was a specific week that they told him, hey, you're going to get an opportunity. He's just tried to tell himself to be ready when it comes. And he's like, hey, at some point they just tell you, grab your helmet, go on the field, and then you want to make an impact. He said he was recruited about halfway through his season last year in high school and just really trusted. He mentioned Benny Wiley specifically and the plan that USC had for him. And not that they pitched him on, hey, you can come in and play as a freshman, but he just liked the plan that they had for him for his career and how they could get him ready. And then he talked about that interception as well as just trying to go out there and make a play, and he certainly did.
He certainly looks ready, too. And with Eric Gentry being out for the season, Rajon Davis redshirting, Mason Cobb's in there, Easton Mascarenas-Arnold's in there, but you need a third linebacker. And right now it looks like Desmond Stevens is in that mix with Anthony Beavers, who I talked to playing a little bit more as a nickel, as a Sam. He's in that mix as well. But I think when you talk about natural linebackers on this team, Desmond Stevens is that natural linebacker. And I asked Lynn about Stevens' safety background because on that interception return, he sure didn't look like a linebacker. He looked like a defensive back the way he was moving. And some of his teammates were like, Jamil Muhammad said this, we were surprised that he didn't take it back to the house for a touchdown because in practice that's what he's done. So, Lynn, what was the number one thing that he talked about when we would interview him in the offseason? He wants to see guys who are versatile. He values that versatility. And Desmond Stevens' background as a safety in high school, now as a linebacker who just kept getting bigger, he can fit that mold really well. And I wouldn't be surprised if that interception is the first of a few for him this season because he had really sure hands. He was in a great position, and I think that's a spot he's going to consistently get to because he's so athletic, because he can backpedal so well. His footwork, I thought, what really stood out to me on that play. His positioning, of course, ceiling's really high for him, and I'm excited to see what he can do the rest of the year in this season for USC that hasn't gone according to plan.
And D'Anton Lynn told us, too, that Zion Branch saw a lot of opportunity because they were using Kamari Ramsey and the nickel just for the game plan. I asked Zion Branch about that. He obviously played a ton of snaps for USC against Penn State. I just asked him, is it fun to play in a defense where three safeties are on the field at the same time, where he's in the Kamari Ramsey's in the nickel and then Zion Branch and N'Keal Arnold are the two safeties. Well, then you'd also have a linebacker in Desmond Stevens who was a former safety. So USC can dial things up, in the pass defense game. And Zion Branch mentioned that he said, I think when D'Anton Lynn cooked up that idea of having the three safeties on the field, they were saying in practice, oh, yeah, this is going to work. This is a good idea. And I think, obviously, he said it was pretty cool that we got to run that package for the majority of the game. And I wonder if that was they wanted Kamari Ramsey in there just in case they needed someone to play man-to-man defense against a tight end because he has shown a proficiency in doing that. But D'Anton Lynn mentioned that Penn State did a variety of tremendous things of moving Tyler Warren around pre-snap so that USC couldn't lock into a specific plan on how to handle him.
I felt like what Lynn talked about, really, he gave a lot of credit to the Penn State OC. I'm going to butcher his name. What is it? Andy Kotelnicki?
Kotelnicki, yeah.
Kotelnicki. He called a really good game, and he kept USC off guard in the sense that if they would run a play that was a run and then, okay, they're going to run based on this formation, then they totally change it. So that was a credit to him, and that's why USC had such a tough time covering Warren. To what you just said, Jack, they did things differently, and pre-snap they would move him around. And I felt like Lynn, as a second-year coordinator, that's something you can learn from. And going forward, USC, I expect, will be a lot better for it. Like, people forget Lynn's only in his second year of calling a defense, and I'd have to go back and look at some of the stats from a year ago, but I don't think any individual player especially a receiver, had a game like that against UCLA last season. So people at all levels of football, coaching players, they go through some of these growing pains. I think USC experienced that a little bit because it was a surprise when, okay, there's Warren again. Why is he so open? And Lynn shed a little bit of light on that. You can hear more from him on our YouTube channel.
I think one positive note to end it on is we're kind of learning D'Anton Lynn for the first time. We kind of knew what we would get from Alex Grinch when we would talk to him in interviews, and this is our first year seeing Lynn. And they're kind of dealing with injury adversity for the first time under him, with Eric Gentry yesterday announcing his red shirt. Obviously, Anthony Lucas announced yesterday out for the season. And Lynn was asked about, hey, how do you move some of those snaps around from Anthony Lucas? What's the plan there? He said they're still figuring that out. But you could just tell, like, he's so competitive that he doesn't care about a player goes down for injury. Man, that sucks for us. He said, I'm so excited for these young guys. I'm so excited to see what we can do with the new guys playing. And you kind of, I could just sense that competitive fire where he's just a guy that he really does embody that next man up. He's trying to think, how can I fill that void with other people? How can we continue to play good defense, not assuming, hey, our best edge rusher's out, so we're going to be worse in these next couple of games. I feel like you could just really tell, his intent and how excited he is to try and figure this out.
And Jamil Muhammad has some of that competitive fire that you talked about, Jack, with Lynn, and he was asked how he can get more sacks and just what he needs to do, and he said just stay focused, and he knows what it takes. He did say this was a little sad that fourth down play where he had Drew Allard dead to rights and he couldn't get him down, and Penn State of course converted it and went on to score a touchdown. He said that play has haunted him all week, which is understandable. If he makes that tackle there, USC wins the game. So Muhammad, he's always pretty even-keeled, and he has a great head on his shoulders. He's one of my favorite guys to talk to and interview, but you could tell that play stays with him, and you got to hope if you're a USC fan that, yes, that didn't go their way, but that'll motivate him to make a play in the future. And now with Anthony Lucas out, expect to see some more of Jamil Muhammad. It would really benefit USC if he could get going here the second half of the season. We talked a lot about Cam Fountain. Lorenzo Cowan was a name mentioned yesterday. Those are two true freshmen, but I look at some of these older guys. Now they'll have a bigger role too, and Muhammad is certainly a big part of that. Braylon Shelby too, and Solomon Tuliapupu probably as well if he's able to play against Maryland, but mostly it's going to be Jamil Muhammad and Braylon Shelby. If those guys take steps forward here, USC will be in a way better spot, because right now they don't really have much of a pass rush.
Yeah, we've seen guys like Devin Tompkins step up. Zion Branch, who we talked about, was a backup to start the season. He's seeing a lot of time, so it'll just have to continue to be next man up for USC as the Trojans head east to play Maryland.
Yes.
I think Anthony Beavers thought it was south. It is the East Coast.
I think he just had a slip of the tongue.
Yeah. But there's no South Coast, but I agree. But that's all we've got for you guys on Instant Analysis today. We are heading east this weekend to cover the game. Hope to see some of you guys out there, potentially at the meetup on Friday night in Maryland, but USC will play a night game against the Terrapins in Maryland on Saturday. But for Connor Morrissette, I'm Jack Smith. Thanks for watching Instant Analysis. Make sure you check out USCfootball.com for more.